Hi everybody, Psalm 97 this Monday morning. It's another one of those psalms that celebrates the royal authority of Yahweh, the covenant-keeping God of Israel, who is king over not just Judah and Jerusalem and Israel, but also the nations, the peoples of the world. It's a kind of global claim for the King of Israel. It's a global claim for Israel's God to have a universal allegiance from all peoples, and a kind of defiance of all of the folly, the foolish idolatries of the nations that are really, signs of their disgrace. I haven't time to read out the whole psalm, but there's all these strong, very kind of expressive declarations of God's supremacy over nature. Creation kind of joins in, testifying about his supremacy. Lightning flashes across the world. The earth sees and trembles. The mountains melt like wax before the Lord. Just earlier, in verse 2, dark clouds surround him. The Lord is king. The Lord reigns. He's the sovereign one. It's a celebration of God's monarchy, and the appropriateness, his worthiness when it comes to the worship and the allegiance of the nations. What struck me today for this morning is that in my 1 year Bible, and if you do the 1 year Bible, you'll have the same thing. This psalm goes with Luke 23, where the same people who celebrated with this very psalm in their gathered worship and liturgy, they start mocking a certain false king who's hanging on a tree. They start saying, if he's really a king, why is he dying on a cross? Why can't he save himself? They join in with the pagans who shame him, they mock him, the Roman soldiers. So instead of the God who is so worth worshipping, so clearly glorious, such a genuine worthy king that even the Gentile nations join in their praise, you have here the Gentile Pontius Pilate putting the words King of the Jews over the hanging false Messiah, the false king, and the Jews joining in their derision with the soldiers as they call out, if you're the King of the Jews, save yourself. One of the criminals hanging beside him scoffed, so you're the Messiah, are you? Prove it by saving yourself. And meanwhile, nature seems to be joining in the sort of despising of this false king as he breathes his last. It says in Psalm 97, dark clouds surround him, speaking of God's majesty, dark clouds. But of course, at the cross, at Calvary, dark clouds begin to surround, and there is lightning and thunder, and even an earthquake. In the psalm, it describes the earth sees and trembles. The mountains melt like wax before the Lord. In the psalm, God's king shows up, and we human beings, we like psalms like that as long as we're on the goodies side, as long as it's our God, our King. And we like that. He fights for us. We win with this psalm. Psalm 97, we win in that psalm, apparently. Jesus, he's a loser. He's hanging naked on a cross. He's covered in shame. He's disgraced. Those who worship idols are disgraced. So he must be a false king. He must be an idolater. He's disgraced. What's he got to do with Israel's God? And yet, irony of ironies, it is in fact Israel's God that is hanging on the cross. This one who causes the mountains to melt like wax. Within his own breast, his own heart is melting like wax. That's even the phrase that the psalmist uses in Psalm 22, describing the sorrows of Calvary. It's the living God on the cross. And everyone assumes that Because God, if God showed up, he'd be the God that would destroy our enemies with the sword, that he would have power, great ascendant power, demonstrated in ways that we could understand, that we could get behind, that we could join in with. And because we would get it, we would be the first to join up if God started flexing his muscles. And this man, this failure, what does he have to do with God? Well, it turns out everything, because the one hanging on the tree is God. There was only one man at Calvary that actually saw it. There was only one that Martin Luther would call a theologian of the cross. It was the thief, the other on the other side, hanging next to Jesus. He said, "Don't you fear God even when you've been sentenced to die? We deserve to die." In other words, this guy's not impressed with himself. This guy says, no, we're getting what we deserve. We're getting the cross. We lose. We're not the winners. We're the losers. We die, and we deserve to. We're a mess. We're being judged. That's how human beings should see themselves before God. And this guy sees it. He understands his desperate condition. He understands he's nothing to claim. And yet, nevertheless, he turns in hope to Jesus and says, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom. You who've done nothing wrong." He saw Jesus was innocent. He saw he was good. And he says, "You're a king." Imagine saying that to a man about to be executed. A man hanging on a cross, a man dying. "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." What kind of nonsense is that? What kind of faith does that take? What kind of thing was he seeing? Well, he was seeing everything, because the thief on the cross, he understood who Jesus is. He got it. No one else that day seemed to. He did. This guy on the cross, he's my hope. He's the only hope. God has showed up, but not to get behind us in our pride. No, to despise our pride. He's not interested in our agenda. God has shown up as a crucified man, and that is my only hope. That's my only hope. I'm not putting my trust in my righteousness, my own performance, anything like that. I turn to you and say, remember me in your kingdom. Let me please come into what you've got coming to you. He trusts in Jesus. That's all he has. And Jesus makes him this magnificent promise, as he does for you today. Turn to Jesus today, again, if it's not for the first time, and say, "Jesus, I've got no hope of my own, nothing to claim. Remember me when you come into your kingdom. This glorious King that came down to the cross. Remember me." And he'll promise you paradise. Father, thank you for Jesus, your glorious Son. The Lord does indeed reign, but he reigns from Calvary. He reigns from the cross. Help us to trust him, even in the pain and the suffering of this world, knowing that he's taking us into a great kingdom, because he really is the King. Amen. Amen. Speak to you soon.